Welcome to Popternative, where we dive into topical discussions from the worlds of pop culture, social media, and sports. Here is your host, Peter Remoliotis, aka PD Beats.
Hello and welcome to Popternative. This is the podcast and talk show where we have digital discussions, the worlds of TV, film, news, sports, music, lifestyle, everything really depending on the guest. Talk about it all. As always, I'm your host, Peter Remoliotis. On social media, me is PD Beats. My guest is a writer, filmmaker, director. Her film Chasing Waterfalls just recently launched on Hallmark. Christie Will Wolf is with us. Christie, welcome to Popternative.
Thanks for having me on.
It's always exciting because you make a film, it's finally out for everyone to see. Isn't it always like an interesting dynamic of like that whole kind of making it, putting it out there, and then it's kind of for the world to decide? Like, isn't that like what's that whole like for you? That last couple of days before it actually releases.
It's an interesting process, especially because as a director, you make the movie and then you make your director's cut. So you have a cut that you really like. And for, say, this recent one, Chasing Waterfalls, I was also a producer on it. So the producer cut was also mine. And then the network comes involved and then they do their cut.
Yep.
So it's almost like fingers crossed that they didn't like mess it up for you. Like that's the feeling. And I think that that's the biggest thing that I'm like, oh my gosh. And then, yeah, if audiences respond to it or not, it's just like anything. I think I've been doing this for a while now. I'm like, okay, some people like it and some people won't. And some people get the joke, my jokes, some people won't. And it kind of goes with it. But I feel intuitively now, I'm like, oh, okay, people are going to like this one. Or, oh, well, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those things too, where, you're wearing many hats on this project and a lot of other projects. When did it kind of sink in for you that you were going to, because a lot of people are wearing many hats now. They're not just doing one thing. They're not just writing something. They're also directing it. They're not just acting in it. They're also producing it. They're wearing many hats. When did you kind of notice that was kind of something you had to do? Like, when did you start wearing many hats, Christie?
Right from coming out of the gate, I was a writer-director. So I was already writing and directing my movies. So I guess the first 5 movies I ever did, I wrote and directed them. And then I started to direct other people's work. And then naturally I just started producing. And that was back to almost the first question, right? Because I wanted a little bit more say in how the final product would turn out.
Yep.
So obviously not investing or any of the financing, but more of a creative producer. So for me, I've always kind of been wearing all 3 hats. For
sure. What can you say about Chasing Waterfalls, which just got premiered on Hallmark? It's exciting times. What can you say about this film?
So that film's a special film, specifically because the 2 leads, Cindy and Chris. So we had done a movie, we shot it last February, and then it premiered last spring, and it's called Love in the Forecast, and written by Barb Kamlicka. And we did that movie, and the plot in that movie there wasn't really any big plot. It was just like boy meets girl or girl meets boy, and they were neighbors and they fall in love. Anyways, but what I found from that is what the audiences loved. They loved Chris and Cindy together, and they liked the writing in that and the banter and their chemistry.
Yep.
So that's how Chasing Waterfalls came. We were like, we got to put them together again. And then this movie, we literally hiked all over British Columbia to try to find these locations. And it was really what you see on screen and the chemistry and the jokes and all of that. That's really very much what we're all like. Like that's what Chris and Cindy and myself, like it was just one of those fun making movies. Like how lucky are we that we do this for a living type of experience for that movie. So
what, in your opinion, is so appealing and popular about the rom-com, the romantic comedy? There's something about this genre that doesn't seem to be kind of going away, but I also think like there's a lot of things happening in the rom-com. There's a lot of genre bending and a lot of like other kind of things happening in a romantic comedy that aren't necessarily romantic and not necessarily comedic. There's a lot of other things. There's some drama in rom-coms now. What do you think about the evolution of the rom-com, Christie?
Well, there's almost been 2, I started out with the traditional rom-com and maybe Slightly Single in LA, and I did this one, Boy Toy, and that was a straight up traditional rom-com where it's a romance and the comedy. And I think that that's what people like, because in real life, like you want to fall in love, but then I think you also want to laugh.
Yep.
For Hallmark, they've taken, they really went from, I used to make rom-coms for them, and then they went to romance movies. And now they seem like they've circled back. So I feel like me as a creator, I'm kind of like, oh, I love it again. I can make the more traditional rom-com rather than the straight romance. And I think audiences just like it. Like people love, everyone loves a good love story. Like, you know, I always think Tom Hanks and Melanie Griffith, like they always loved those guys together. And I think that this is, I think that's what I'm always trying to do. Like those are my kind of what I always do callbacks to, those types of movies.
Absolutely. Have you kind of noticed any, like, for example, you say you've been doing this for quite some time. Every project's going to have a different feel, different learning experiences. What have you noticed in terms of the craft of kind of making and writing a film? What has changed in regards to that? I'm not talking about like reception or everything, but like making a film now. Is it kind of like, is it the same as it was in terms of how you're kind of the writing process, how you're directing? What are some trends that have changed in terms of making a movie, Christie?
Well, the biggest trend I would say that I'm noticing right now, and it's hopefully not a trend, it's just is the way now, is diversity.
Mhm.
And if you look back on my films, I've always leaned into diversity just because, you know, all my friends are white, black, Asian. Like I always have diverse friends. I've always had them. So again, as a filmmaker, it's nice now that the doors are just opening.
Yep.
So I can always now not think, oh, I just have to cast two white leads. It's like, oh, I can do, you know, it's like, who's the best person for the project? And I'd say overall, that's the biggest thing that's changed, is that we can now tell stories that are more realistic for how life is and how our friendships are. So, yeah.
Oh, that's great. What is the best thing about being a storyteller? Because that's what you're basically doing. Like you're writing, you're directing, you're a storyteller. That's like what you do as a career. Even though it's like writer, filmmaker, director, it's all storytelling. What's the best thing about being a storyteller, Christie?
I think the best thing about it for me is that I don't know, it's like write what you know. Like sometimes I feel like this is my way of therapy in a way. Like I just take what's going on in my life or what's gone in my
Yep.
life and then bring it to the screen. So you can take a moment that felt very serious at the time, but then you're like, it's actually quite comical, and bring it to the screen. And I just I just love telling stories and trying to get the most authentic story that can be relatable to my audiences. That's what I feel like I'm always going to. Like, if I can make them laugh, but what can I make them laugh authentically to? So something that they're an experience that's happening with their own boyfriend or their own friend or with their own parents. So it's like just trying to always find that and grasp. Like my friends will say that, like at dinner parties, or not recently, but at dinner parties and stuff like that, I'm always the one to be like, oh my gosh, and I'll pull out my phone and jot something down when somebody says something, because I'm like, oh, I got to get that into one of my movies.
Oh, for sure. And I find it interesting as well too, because we're you there's always in like entertainment and in filmmakers and even in music, there's always people changing and wanting to make things better, because I feel like people think changing it up compared to what they've done in the past will make it better and different and fresh. That's like a thing I always see a lot. But I find it interesting and I want your opinion on this. I mean, there's always, changing things, tweaking things, making things better, making things bigger sometimes. But there's also like if it works and what works for you is working and people enjoy it and you enjoy it, is there a need to change all the time? Like, is there a need for you, to change the way you're making movies, so to speak? You know what I mean? Compared to other things. What do you think about that? Because I find that's an interesting kind of narrative and dialogue as well. The change, not change type thing.
Well, I think for the rom-com, like for the movies that I've been making, yeah, with that instinct to change, to okay, I've done that story, I want to do something different now. But what I have found through doing it is that there's a reason why tropes exist. There's a reason, because the audiences like it. So I actually have pulled back on trying to be different, instead kind of embracing my own voice as a storyteller. And I would say now what I strive to do in my films, and as I do more and more films, is how can I thread this all together better? So it's almost technically like, how can I do transitions better and get them in? And now it's like working with, it's almost like that. And now knowing what do my audiences like and what are they responding to and what that never really works. So now it's like going to what works and what doesn't work, And then it's you can continue, like I'm always writing, so then it's just coming up with new funny dialogue that's relatable again. But I think for me, I am kind of done trying to do something. I try not to think of doing something new. I just try to think of doing it better.
Yeah.
So if I'm doing television movies and they're airing on television, I want viewers to be like, this is just as good as something I would go and see in the theater. So that's what I feel like that's where I'm at right now. So there's no difference from going to see it in the theater versus now seeing it on television. And that's why I like Hallmark's gone too, is that they've raised the bar. They're like, we want something like that. Like you might not see the AA list stars, but that's maybe, hopefully for me, that's what I'm trying to achieve.
That excites me that you bring that up, because I've noticed that right now, especially with streaming platforms, and the fact that, a lot of movies, will air on a certain network, or they'll air on demand on digital, and then they might be on another streaming platform. It's funny how there was that stigma attached to like made for TV or like video on demand. And I feel like that's completely gone right now. It's funny you mentioned that. Do you think streaming platforms as well have kind of diminished that as well? Where it's just like,
oh yeah,
I find that interesting too. Cause like made for TV, like it's true. Like you said, there was a little bit of a stigma attached to like movies for TV.
Yeah, well, the movies, I find my movies for TV, it's like 50, when they go, it's like 50-50 if it's gonna, well, a lot of them are always on Prime and Apple, you can find them all there.
Yeah.
But some of the ones like Hallmark, like you'll find internationally, they stream everywhere else too. But yeah, the bar's certainly raised. Well, if you look at this past year, right? Like nobody's
no
making
one's
any
going to
movies
the
except for us.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
we're the only ones. So we got to like raise the bar, make sure like the audiences are far more critical, they want, so it's like, okay. And I'd say the biggest difference going back to what I'm now also trying to break away with, but this goes back to network choices and stuff, is almost the television movie versus a traditional movie. For me, it's often the score, and sometimes like ding, 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 ding. And if you strip that away, the movie is always just as comparably good, but historically they kind of like that. I don't know why, that's support, but I've been trying creatively to strip that away and talk with my network executives to strip it away. And my executives are always awesome. And the composers are too. They never want to do wall-to-wall music, but that's what we've been trying to get away now with too.
Oh, absolutely. No, for sure. Christie, thank you so much for coming on Popternative.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Yeah, so the movie just got released on Hallmark. So
and in Canada, it's on the W network.
And
so
it's
you
on
can
the
see it on the W.
Absolutely. And where can people follow you on social media to keep up to date with everything as well?
So I'm on Instagram, Christie Will Wolf, and I'm shooting right now. So I'm shooting a movie also with Cindy Busby and Chris. So I do a lot of behind the scenes. So that's my flower falling into my shot. So if you do follow me, you'll see like lots of fun behind the scenes of what goes on. And so I'm mainly active on Instagram, Christie Will Wolf.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, this has been Popternative, youtube.com/Popternative for previous episodes. Until next time, this is Christie Will Wolf and PD Beats signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube. Be sure to like Popternative on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.